One morning, when a grieving middle-aged mother Mildred sees 3 damaged billboards placed in a line, she gets an idea on how to push the city police department. She thinks the cops and the city chief Bill Willoughby are not doing their job of finding her teen daughter Angela's killers, even 7 months after she was sexually assaulted and murdered. She rents the billboards from the billboard agent Welby for a year, paying $5,000 in advance for the first month. Drunkard police officer Dixon is the first to see them on the night of their installation. The billboards read, "Raped while dying, and still no arrests? How come, Chief Willoughby?" Getting alarmed, Officer Dixon calls his boss and mentor, Willoughby, immediately, in the middle of his supper with his family. Robbie, Mildred's younger son, reads them when Mildred drives him to school the next day. He remains silent though they bother him. Willoughby and his desk sergeant go to Welby's office right opposite their police station to persuade him to take off the billboards. Dixon also aggressively confronts him on the road between their station house and Welby's office, but Welby shows no inclination to fold under their pressure. Meanwhile, a local TV reporter covers the story of the billboards and airs it along with Mildred's interview. She criticizes the police and their chief for their racist conduct and trivial actions while not pursuing her daughter's case. The buck stops with Willoughby, she concludes. Willoughby, who is as decent a police officer as they come, reaches out to Mildred, trying to reason with her. It is unfair to damage his reputation, as he is doing everything he can to catch Angela's killers, he tells her. He also reveals that he was recently diagnosed with terminal cancer, indirectly asking her to go easy on him. But Mildred doesn't budge. "Well, the billboards wouldn't be as effective after you croak, would they?" That night Mildred also makes her intentions clear to Dixon, Welby, and her little admirer and car salesman, James, when she runs into them in a bar. When Mildred comes home, she is ambushed by the church pastor. He tries to convince her that the billboards were a bad idea. She basically tells him that since he's a member of the church and they have a tendency to diddle with kids, his opinion doesn't really matter to her. The next morning Mildred goes for a dentist appointment. She feels that something is a little off about him this time, and when he starts voicing his opinion about the billboards as he's about to drill her tooth, she grabs his hand and drills his thumb instead. Willoughby decides to go through Angela's case file one more time while standing right under those billboards for some inspiration. But once again, he finds nothing that he can proceed on. Later that day, he has to bring in Mildred for questioning, as the dentist presses charges against her. Before Willoughby could come in to inquire her, Mildred teases Dixon about his racist behavior torturing black people. Dixon also lets his displeasure known about her racism complained against them on the TV channel that his mom watches. Willoughby comes in, sends Dixon outside, and jokes saying there won't be many cops left if one eliminates all the racist ones, trying to create a lighter mood. When Willoughby asks her about injuring the dentist's finger, she confidently says that the dentist injured himself and that it would be his word against hers. She also draws a comparison to all the sexual abuse cases with no witnesses, saying the girl won't be losing this time. Willoughby comes back at her with all the work time she could be losing at the gift shop in case of a court trial, which would affect her ability to pay for the billboards next month. He also asks her if her ex-husband, an ex-cop, Charlie, who is dating a 19-year-old zoo intern, knows about the billboards yet, as he still gets his cop insurance. Midway through their conversation, Willoughby accidentally coughs out blood right onto Mildred's face. He apologizes to her right away and later orders his reluctant deputy Dixon to let her go while still being taken on a stretcher into the ambulance. Later that day, when Mildred is driving Robbie from the school and passing through the billboards, Robbie can't hide his anger at his mom for the awful detailing in those billboards, which kept reminding him about his sister's horrible death. After reaching home, Mildred looks at Angela's room, which reminds her of the quarrel between her, Angela, and Robbie on the fateful day. At the end of the fight, a miffed Mildred asks Angela to walk instead of giving her the car keys. As Angela angrily leaves, she shouts, "I hope I get raped on the way," to which Mildred responds, "I hope the same too." She painfully remembers her last words. Mildred and Robbie find their kindred spirit back in the morning with their usual funny abusive gags before her wife-beating ex-husband Charlie shows up with his young and stupid girlfriend. He walks in with rage about the billboards, and as tensions rise in their conversation, he catches Mildred by her throat. Robbie stands up for his mom, threatening his father with a knife. Before leaving, Charlie tells Mildred how he convinced Angela to stay with Mildred when she wanted to move in with him. If only he hadn't done that, Angela would have been still alive. Meanwhile, Willoughby realizes that his days are numbered now, as the doctor pretty much says it without saying it. Taking Willoughby's absence as an advantage, and some advice from his mom, Dixon arrests Mildred's only friend Denise for possession of pot. He then tells Mildred that Denise won't get bail also, as he told the judge about her previous violations. Mildred rightly speculates about Dixon's mom coaching him, and that's enough to shut him up. Willoughby spends a good day out with his lovely wife, Anne, and 2 kids out on a riverside. Mildred finds an adorable deer near the billboards when she is placing flower baskets. She makes a one-sided conversation with the deer, wondering if it could be her reincarnated daughter, like a crazy thought. Later Mildred meets Welby, who has grown a soft spot for Willoughby ever since he learned about his cancer problem. He asks Mildred for the next month's payment within a few days, which he knows to be hard for her. However, his girl assistant rushes in with an envelope of $5,000 that was just delivered by a Mexican delivery boy. A note inside the envelope says it is for Mildred's Billboards rent. That night, Willoughby puts both his girls to bed, makes a sweet intimate conversation with Anne about their day out and lovemaking in the woods before going to his stable and shooting himself in the head. In a heart-wrenching letter to Anne, Willoughby writes how he didn't want to see the pain in her eyes in his struggling last days and leave bad memories. He, instead, wants those memories to be about their last days moments in the woods. It was the best day of his life. If we won't be meeting in another place, it's been heaven knowing you. Dixon is enjoying some music with earphones on when the desk sergeant brings the news to the police station in the morning. Learning about Willoughby's suicide, one of the deputies breaks some furniture inside the police station, and Dixon takes the desk sergeant's shoulder to cry on, but only inside the bathroom. Minutes later, as the desk sergeant was delivering a speech on Willoughby, Dixon finds Welby enjoying some music on the opposite building. Putting his dark glasses on, Dixon loses his shit and walks up the stairs to Welby's office to punch his head to pulp and throw him out through the window onto the road. He also vandalizes Welby's office and knocks out his lady assistant. Walking down the stairs, he again finds Welby crawling for cover on the road to deliver another punch to his already bloody face, stunning some townspeople. One of them is a black man standing by the station house, Abercrombie, who has come to replace Willoughby as the new chief. The morning news on TV covers Willoughby's death and speculates if the reason could be his rumored illness or the pressure from Mildred's billboards. When Mildred drops off Robbie that morning, a schoolboy throws a soda can onto her windshield. Not backing down, Mildred walks to him and his supposed girlfriend to ask about it. She hits them both in the crotch as they lie about throwing the can. When Abercrombie walks into the station filled with racist cops, he takes them right on and makes his presence felt right away by firing Dixon, who has even lost his badge. Around the same time, a stranger finds Mildred alone in the gift store. He tries to give her some trouble by making her guess if he is just another townsman or one of Angela's killers, which he says he would have liked to, after looking at her picture. The doorbell rings and Anne walks in to make him go away for the time being, and hands over a letter Willoughby wrote for her to Mildred, along with some painful statements. Starting with an apology for dying before catching her daughter's killers, Willoughby tells Mildred that he did care and tried his best to catch them, hoping that some bragging talk somewhere by one of the killers would lead to their arrest. He admits to the fact that the billboards were a great idea. He also rightly predicts that the town may blame her and the billboards for his suicide, and as a counter to that, he reveals that he, himself, sent that billboard's rent for the next month. "The joke is on you now, Mildred, ha ha ha," he writes at the end, hoping she would catch those killers fast. Meanwhile, after losing his job, Dixon spends time with his mother, who thinks he can go back to being a cop by paying someone off. One night, when Mildred and Robbie are driving through, they see the billboards on fire. They try to extinguish it but only end up with some burns to their bodies and 3 burnt billboards. The police arrive a few minutes later, and their new chief Abercrombie tries to reach out to Mildred, but she doesn't have any of it. When she passes through them again in the morning, a TV reporter with a cameraman speculates it could be the end of the billboard saga. An angry Mildred gives the female reporter a mouthful of abuse and proclaims that it is only the beginning. Meanwhile, Dixon gets a call from the desk sergeant, as Anne has given him the letter Willoughby had written for Dixon. The sergeant asks Dixon to collect the letter from the station house after hours. He asks him to use the back door key Dixon still has and leave the key behind as well. That night Dixon gets into the station house. With his earphones on, he starts to read the letter using a torch. Willoughby tells Dixon how decent he thinks of him. He advises him to get rid of the hate that grew in his heart while standing alone for his mom all his life. It is a must if he really wants to be what he wants to be, a detective. He asks Dixon to try love for a change. With love comes calmness and thought, which are essential for a detective. As Dixon is reading through Willoughby's letter, Mildred walks up to the abandoned office of Welby opposite the station house. She calls the station multiple times to make sure that no one is inside. Dixon, however, doesn't hear the telephone ring with his earphones on until one of the many Molotovs thrown by Mildred jolts him to the ground. Suddenly surrounded by fire, Dixon stands back on his feet only to lay eyes on Angela's case file. He saves it from burning before jumping through the window with his body on fire. Fortunately, James finds Dixon right away to doze off the fire. Even Mildred sees Dixon and she walks down the stairs. She finds James helping Dixon and her daughter's case file at her feet on the road. The police arrive soon, and James becomes Mildred's alibi for the night when Abercrombie inquiries. James gets a dinner date with Mildred for his big favor, but Mildred makes it pretty clear that it will only be a dinner. Dixon makes it to the hospital and gets wrapped up in bandages pretty much head to toe. He incidentally finds himself beside Welby, who is still hospitalized. Unable to identify Dixon, Welby tries to cheer up the badly burned new patient by offering him orange juice. Dixon starts crying and apologizes. When Welby realizes who he is, he can barely contain himself. He still brings him the glass of juice and limps back to his bed. Jerome, the guy who was one of the crew members that had installed the billboards, reaches out to Mildred with the duplicates of the posters. James tries to be a sport, holding Mildred's already steady ladder while she puts those posters back again on the billboards with some help from Jerome and Robbie. Mildred's friend Denise meets them there on her way out from jail. When Jerome asks if they should still place the last poster that questions Willoughby, Mildred says, "Why not? He paid for it." James finally goes out with Mildred for dinner, but her ex-husband Charlie happens to come there with his girlfriend as well. Charlie comes over to their table to throw some physical, emotional, and racist insults at both James and Mildred, after which Mildred loses her composure and tells James that he has forced the dinner upon her. James stands for himself, calling on Mildred's misgivings as a no-fun human being who can't be nice to anyone and who sets up police stations on fire. With a broken heart, James waddles away. Mildred goes to Charlie's table to offer them the champagne bottle and tells him to be nice to his 19-year-old girlfriend, at least. After getting out of the hospital, Dixon listens to a guy's hideous talk at a bar about him and his friends abusing a girl. Dixon diligently goes out to note down that person's vehicle number and then goes back in to collect some DNA from the guy. He achieves it by scraping his fingers through the guy's cheek for a supposed magic trick, and it results in him getting beaten up. With his doubled up wounds, Dixon reaches his home. Ignoring his worried mother, he closes himself in a room to collect the skin from his nails into a test tube and write down the vehicle number on it to be given for a DNA test. Dixon meets Mildred at her place the next morning to let her know about the incident and the guy who could possibly be one of Angela's killers. Mildred thanks him for his efforts. Abercrombie commends Dixon for his efforts before revealing that the DNA didn't match to any crimes. He also tells him that the suspected guy has a clean record and happened to be outside the country in a war during the time of Angela's death. Dixon returns the badge he has finally found back to the chief before leaving his office. Still not convinced about the guy's clean record, Dixon calls Mildred and tells her about the DNA result. Sitting under a billboard, Mildred can't take the news from Dixon as it has been the only beacon of hope in her long struggle to find her daughter's killers. She finally weeps after a long time. Dixon then suggests that the guy could have done his deed somewhere else and tells her that he has the guy's address in Idaho. Mildred tells him that she somehow happens to be going to Idaho the following morning. Dixon offers to accompany her, and she readily accepts. In the early hours of the following morning, Dixon takes a leave from his sleeping mother, as Mildred does the same with her son Robbie. Dixon brings his rifle and gets onto Mildred's car for their trip to Idaho. Mid-journey, Mildred confesses to him that the station fire was her doing. Well, who the hell else would it have been? They discuss if they are sure about killing the guy, and they are not. I guess we can decide on the way. The end.